I have here something special to you. 1863.
Are you kidding?
We're not going to open this, are we? It's true, yes, it's true.
Oh my goodness.
You still be alive.
Hey, Vince with Vintage Ferreira here, and yes, I did indeed drink a wine from 1863. Wild, right? I'm gonna show you today that full clip that you just saw a preview of where I drank it. Here is the bottle I drank, but it is noticeably empty, and that is because I drank this last year in the Port episode of the wine show I host and produce Vintage Ferreira, and you can watch that full video on our page. I'm also gonna pop the link here above my head, put it in the description. So what we're gonna do today is I'm going to show you this full clip from the episode where we drink this wine, and then I'll come back here and we'll talk about how this segment came to be, some behind the scenes moments, and some information that I just didn't have time to put in the original episode. Also why this wine can age so long, what it is, etc. If you have a moment before we get started, do me a favor for the almighty YouTube algorithm, give a like, and if you haven't subscribed yet and you're into wine content, please give us a subscribe. We have our full episodes and all sorts of amazing wine content on the page. All right, without any further ado, we're gonna go now into the clip of me trying this 1863 Vintage Ferreira Port. Now for context, in the episode, we were doing a tasting of Ferreira wines, and we had done 4 ports before this, some really amazing stuff, and I thought the tasting was over. And then Luis, who is the winemaker for Ferreira, he said, hang on one second, I have a surprise for you. He went back into the back. He goes out, picks up this wine, and that is where we're gonna pick up with this clip. So here we go, and I'll see you after the clip.
Eating some good cheese and drinking that wine is the best you can have in the life.
Speaking of the best you can have in life, Luis had one final surprise for me.
I have here something special to you. This is a 1966. We have here a wine with more 103 years than that. 1863.
Are you kidding?
Yes, I'm not kidding.
We're not going to open this, are we?
It's true, yes, it's true, it's true.
That's right, a bottle of 1863 Ferreira Port. Nearly 160 years old, before the World Wars, before the Eiffel Tower, blue jeans, and the light bulb were invented. A time when the US was at civil war, only had 34 states, and the national anthem had yet to be written. When we say wine is history in a bottle, it's rarely this literal. Even the bottle has a story.
This is a bottle made by hand. Looking at that bottle, the neck is not in vertical position.
Yeah, you can see kind of the divots. It's not perfect.
The bottle is something amazing. To look at the color. It's fantastic. Is a wine to thinking, to talk, to discuss.
The color is the thing that is absolutely blowing my mind. Just that beautiful amber gold. It looks like an aged white. It looks like an aged Chardonnay. Oh wow. This is the most over-the-top nose we've had all day.
They have honey.
That Ionium even more pronounced, right? That pharmacy. And I had never heard that, but that is exactly what it is. It smells like an old pharmacy. Crushed flowers. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
You still be alive.
It has this character almost like a bourbon with these beautiful vanilla caramel honey, rich extracted amber honey.
This is a question of sensations. It's not only the quality of the wine. It's the story. It's the story which is behind him. It's a wine not easy to describe, but only to say thanks to God to give us the possibility to taste a wine like that.
To be grateful for that, and to be grateful for you for choosing to share this. I very much appreciate it. This is one of the most special moments of my life.
It has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
One of the most inspiring parts of trying this wine was this. The bottle was not only still sound, it was incredible. With no modern farming technology, no benefit of the metering and the measuring and the science of modern winemaking, the people of Ferreira in 1863 managed to make a wine that lasted 160 years. And Luis now makes wines that will outlive him by the same. As I shared the bottle with Luis, the Ferreira team, and the crew, I reflected on the journey it had taken and the fortune I'd had. The generations who passed it down one to the next, each saying, "Nah, don't open it yet." And I was the lucky man who someone looked at, Luis, luck, God, and said, "Now it's time." And so there it is, tasting an 1863 vintage port. Obviously an incredible experience, really touching, emotional for me. I get to share it with the crew. We really had a special moment. And a lot of people, I think their first thought is like, well, how much is this bottle? How much does it cost? I was talking to one of my best friends who's a Assam. He says, some wines are on our wine list and they have a price, but only because I have to put a price, because I have to sell the wine. But they really are truly priceless. This wine in particular, obviously the history, right? How old it is. There's only so many left. In fact, if you look at the shot of me in the cellar, you can see it looks like maybe there's like a dozen or so of these bottles left. The other reason this wine is priceless is because it was the 1863 vintage, which was one of the last vintages that was pre-phylloxera. Now, phylloxera was this kind of root louse pest that destroyed a lot of vines in Europe, and a lot of vines had to be ripped out and replanted. And so this was made with pre-phylloxera vines, which again, priceless. I do believe it's sold, if you are like, all right, well, still, what's the price? I do believe it's sold at an auction, a similar one for $3,200 or so a few years back. I don't know what it'd get today, but at the end of the day, only so many people have the experience and the honor to try wines like these. And so for me, an incredible moment that'll live not only in just my wine career, but just in my life for forever. I'll know this moment in my life forever. All right, so let's talk about a few things about this wine, how this segment happened. The first thing I want you to look at, and I talk about it quickly, is the bottle shape. The bottle shape, so this is a handmade bottle. If you notice, it's wobbly, it's crooked because it's not perfect on the bottom. Although it does have this cool, it has the name of the company kind of pressed in there, but you can see the glass isn't perfect. There's like divots. The neck is crooked. It kind of goes off this way. It's kind of hard to tell on the camera, but it's a crooked neck. And then the neck itself, you can see the cork, it's not straight. It kind of does this. The cork does this when it comes out because the neck isn't machine done. So it's a really interesting bottle just in itself, and I'm glad I got to take it home and keep it here kind of for posterity. As I mentioned earlier in the episode, for wines like this, what they do is they change out the cork every 20 or 30 years to preserve it. They do that by hand. So for all these old bottles, every 20 or 30 years, they say, okay, let's swap the cork. And the reason they do that is because cork is a natural product. Over time, it starts to deteriorate and it could ruin the wine. Corks allow a little oxygen in, but you don't want it to deteriorate to the point where it allows too much and really ruins the wine. So every 20 to 30 years since 1863, they've manually swapped it out. And when I took it out in the clip, you can still see it kind of falls apart on us. It's still an old cork. So you can imagine how it would have fallen apart if you had left it since 1863. So that being said, then he goes off, he decants it. Interesting fact about the sediment that was in this bottle. He was like, oh, you can use this sediment to cook with. You don't want to drink it, but like if you put this in like a stock, it's really, really amazing. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So he decants the bottle, gets the sediment out, which just happens when a wine ages. And for a wine like this, there was a lot of sediment. Like if you took a wine glass, it had like this much full of sediment. It was crazy. Pours it back into the bottle just for the presentation. And then what's funny is I can still smell it, and it still smells amazing. It smells like a bourbon, honestly, which is one of the tasting notes I describe it when we're in the segment. And it still has that, which is pretty remarkable. What is this bottle and why can it age? So I'd encourage you to go watch the full episode of Port to learn all about, what is port wine and its history. But the short answer of why it can age so long is because it's a fortified wine. And that means they add a clear neutral spirit, like basically a clear brandy, to the wine to boost the alcohol content to about 20%. And it also stops the fermentation mid-fermentation, which means that there's some residual grape sugar in there. In fact, there's a lot of residual grape sugar in there. And the combination of the alcohol and the sugar, and to the lesser extent, the acid and the tannin, so all four of those things, allow port wine to age uniquely more than almost any other wine on the planet. All those things help act as natural preservative to the wine, and so that is the reason this wine can age. This wine was a vintage port. So most vintage ports, what they do is they spend a few years, maybe like 2 or 3, in large oak casks, and then they put it directly in bottle. So it probably didn't spend a lot of time in oak, and instead was mostly spent its age in the bottle to have kind of its development of flavors. So how did this segment happen in the first place? So we were filming with Ferreira, and they had told our crew, hey, listen, there's gonna be a special 5th wine, because we had to prep, you know, the cameras, make sure we knew it was coming. I didn't know what it was going to be. I found out later, the board of directors for Ferreira actually have to authorize the release of these wines. Again, they're priceless. So they all had to get on board and say, okay, this show that he's doing is worth us opening one of these really old bottles. I think it's one of the oldest they still have. I think there's one older that I saw in their cellar, but this is one of the oldest bottles they have. So it was a really big deal that they pulled one of these out of their cellar just for this segment. So I'm really glad it all went according to plan. I've always had this big fear in my head that when we start filming, something's gonna happen and all the cameras are gonna get corrupted and I'm gonna lose the precious shot. But everything thankfully went according to plan. Some other notes that I just kind of have in my head. One of the things that shocked me, and I mentioned it in the voiceover, but I can't stress it enough, is how amazing it is that this wine was sound. And by sound, I mean not flawed, not over-oxidated, not ruined, basically. Because one, okay, the cork, I said every 20, 30 years, got to change it out, make sure. Number 2, just the journey it took, staying in that cellar, you know, living through wars and all sorts of, you know, weather and potential natural disasters, whatever it might be. Like, it just happened to be lucky enough to be still around. The other thing, and I think I can't stress this enough, is how miraculous it was that the winemaking in 1863, this was all before the science that allowed us to really truly understand what would make a wine age. Plus, you know, you're hand harvesting, you are doing all the processes pretty much by hand, all the winemaking processes. So the fact that they were able to make something that would survive, and not just survive, it wasn't just like it was an okay wine. It wasn't like, oh, I've had those. I've had wines that are like from the 1950s, and it's like, oh, cool that I got to try it. But, you know, it's on its way out, it's past its peak. I mean, this wine was spectacular. It was so complex. It was a red ruby wine when it started, and you saw the color when we poured it, it turned into this like light amber. And that's what happens. The color fades as red wines get older, and it faded so much that it got into these kind of chamomile, vanilla, caramel notes, very similar to what would happen with a tawny port, but it was a ruby. Just another note on like how amazing it is that this wine survived. A lot of times when you buy wines like these at an auction, or if you go to a restaurant and you buy a really old wine, they don't guarantee that the wine's gonna be okay. You know, most places, when you go to a restaurant, you buy a bottle, they present the wine, they pour taste. That's for you to make sure the wine is sound, and if it's not, they'll bring you a new one. Most auctions and most old wines like this, it's buyer beware, which is, you know the risk of getting a wine this old, right? So, you know, this is on you. We can vouch for its storage. Here's the records of it and what's been done to it and what we know. But at the end of the day, if it's no good, it's on you. They're not gonna back it up and get you a new one. So again, just a really remarkable thing that it was as sound as it was. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, I tried to talk a little bit in the episode and just now about what it was like to taste this, because I'm always thinking, okay, you're watching behind a camera, you can't actually taste it, so how can I describe it best to you so you can understand it and try and, you know, vicariously be there with me? And at one point, Luis, I didn't put this in the final edit, but he just kind of described to me, he was like, basically trying to say, stop trying to describe it. It's more about the sensation, the moment, the history, the feeling you have tasting it than it is about the wine itself. And as someone who was trying to describe it to you behind the camera, I was like, oh yeah, I just need to appreciate this moment, appreciate what this is, understand that that's the value here. That's what's magical about this moment. Not as much the wine itself as it is the feeling and the emotion and the sensation you get as you're drinking it. And so I thought that was a really interesting thing from Luis. Even him, who had tasted a lot of these, he's a very well-known winemaker. He's made 100-point wines. He's tried a lot of these, and even he still was excited to try this, with me. So I think that really said a lot. So that's it. That was some of my behind the scenes of what it was like to taste this magical bottle. I really encourage you, if you are into this kind of stuff, watch the full port episode. We talk about this wine, which has this really amazing history. The episode itself is a blast. We have some amazing people. Portugal itself is an amazing place. Porto is beautiful. So watch the full episode if you have time. I think you'll really enjoy it. And one more thing, if you get into our channel and you start liking the content, it would mean the world if you'd please consider joining our Vino VIP club. That's our membership only club, and it's really fun. It's $5, $10, or $20 a month. And it, one, helps support us, but number two, you get access to videos that are only for our members. We do raffles and giveaways each and every month, and then once a year we have a big one. We do virtual tastings once every quarter and a few other things. So if you get into the channel and you start enjoying the content we're putting out, please consider joining Vino VIP. And yeah, go dive into the channel. Check it out. I hope you enjoy the content, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.